morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. So I'll just do just a brief introduction, but our guests will talk about themselves. They are from Pathways for Prevention. So we've got Kimberley Minich and Kevin Phair with us. They're going to be talking throughout the week. Actually, they're here till Thursday this week, and they'll be working with students from grades 5 to 12. So here's an opportunity just to hear a little bit about their stories, and they'll tell you a little bit more what they're going to be talking to your children about. If you have any questions, please feel free. We're a small enough group you can ask questions to our speakers. But if you have any even afterwards, they'll be happy to talk with you throughout the week. So thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Phair from Pathways for Prevention, and I have been in healthy long-term recovery since September 29th of 2015. Prior to moving overseas from the U.S., where I'm from, I was a substance abuse counselor. I was working with mostly adult men that were battling the disease of addiction. And then we moved overseas, and I started in the path to Pathways for Prevention. But I started in this path of offering prevention to schools. And the first school that ever invited me onto their campus was ISP 2 years ago. I was here. And at that point, I was by myself, and I worked with as many students as I possibly could in 5 days. And I think I got just about every student in the school. It was a wild week by myself, but we started hopefully a tradition that will go on, and a foundation of offering prevention to students at this school to help them with the decision-making process of whether or not to use substances, start limiting the amount of substances maybe they are using, encouraging them to make healthier choices. Throughout this week and any other time that Kimberly or I or both of us are here, we will never once tell a student not to do drugs. It just doesn't work. If I could come in here and go to my assembly today with the high school students and tell them, stand in front of everyone and say, all right, everyone listen to me, don't do drugs. And they all said, okay, got it. All right, it's cool, I'll see you next year. Right? That doesn't work, we tried that already. It's about trying to get them to understand how to make a healthier decision. So it's a healthy decision versus an unhealthy decision. Not good versus bad or right versus wrong. It's trying to empower them with the information to know what's going on in their developing brains, how peer pressure and their social influences form their decision-making process, and get them to just try to make healthier choices. Right? It's kind of motivational interviewing in a sense that we're meeting the students where they're at, and we're trying to push them to everyone in this room has the same goal. To not have our students use and abuse substances. So how do we get them to that point? Telling them not to do drugs is not necessarily going to be the case, but providing with all this information, knowing that if they follow our information, their eventual decision is going to be not to use or to limit or cut down on the amount they're using. That's a win for us. And so that's kind of our message here. We're going to provide students with a whole bunch of information through seminars like this, activities, one-on-one meetings if they want. We're offering our services so that students can come and ask us specific questions where maybe they might be a little bit timid or shy in asking in front of a whole group. We offer some office hours so they can come and talk to us. So what I'm going to do today is provide you with a little information about what we'll be talking about with the students, some information for you to help you how you can communicate with them, how you can talk about this in your homes, at your dinner tables, in your car rides, whatever the case might be, and help them and support them in that goal of making healthier choices and decisions when it comes to substances. All right. So usually we're doing 2 sessions with the parents in the community this week. So this session right now, I haven't talked to any students yet. Kimberly and I haven't talked to any students. But as the week goes on, we'll share that what students are talking about in the next parent session, which will also be recorded. And then I will be sending out some additional resources for all the parents that will be sent out probably at the end of the week. I'll give them to the school, and they'll have some good links in there with some statistics, how to talk. If anyone is looking to maybe quit vaping, there's a really great quit plan that's on there, and some current trends and things like that. So you'll have a little more information so you can continue this conversation when we leave. All right? Okay, so I hope you enjoy this. Please, at any point, feel free to raise your hand, ask any question, anything that's on your mind, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. I'll also try to leave, I say try because it's hard for me, but I'll try to leave a little time at the end, too, for you to ask some questions. Okay? So feel free to interrupt, or you can wait until the end. All right, at Pathways for Prevention, we're taking a universal prevention approach. We are trying to deter the onset of drug misuse in students by providing them with evidence-based information, resources, activities that will help mold their decision to make the healthy choice. So we're working on being as culturally competent as we can, because the trends and the use of substances differs from through cultures all over the world. I live in Oman right now. My wife was an international teacher. The culture of alcohol use in Oman is much different than the culture of alcohol use in Prague and in Czech Republic or Europe in general. So we take that into account when we're working with students. We're using our evidence-based program services, and we're trying to be as age appropriate as we can. So a lot of these messages the same message is going to be delivered to 5th graders that 12th graders. We're just going to say it in a different way to help them understand their developing brain and what's going on. We're grade 12 students. We're talking about students that might even be legal drinkers at this point. They might legally be able to use nicotine products depending on where they are in the world. They're also getting ready to transition to university. So we're talking about the same concepts, just in a different way for those students. All right, so we start by always talking about the brain. Addiction really starts and stops with the brain when we talk about first use all the way up to abuse. What's going on in the developing brain? Why is it so important for young people to understand how substances can interfere with their brain development, get students to understand that the single greatest risk factor for them is their age of first use. Okay? If we know through science and research and understanding, the earlier a person starts using substances, the higher risk they have of developing an addiction or an abuse to it because of the developing brain. So the disease model of addiction, it is primary, progressive, chronic, and it can be fatal. It follows that's the same thing that we talk about when we talk about diabetes, we talk about cancer, heart disease, and many other illnesses, is they follow that same pattern. So we have a lot of people that might just be able to use substances in a normal, quote unquote, or a regular setting or a social setting. The majority of students at this school will do that for their whole life. They'll be able to use the substances appropriately. But what happens is for those students that are at higher risk or become more abusive, then they are stuck in this disease model. When that disease of addiction hits and they're diagnosed with it, all right, we're in trouble already. Addiction is a disease that we don't really talk about it until it's already diagnosed, right? Someone has, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in this world that suffer from cancer or get cancer, but what we don't go in, you get diagnosed with cancer and the doctor says, don't worry, it's only stage 1 cancer. Come back when it's stage 4. That doesn't happen. But with addiction, that happens. By the time it's already chronic and near fatal, that's when they actually get services. Right? I mean, think about the uproar if someone was sent out of the office because they didn't have stage 4 cancer. They only had stage 1 cancer. That wouldn't be taken very well by the public, but with addiction, that's what happened. So it's already been primary, they already had the disease, it's already ramping up, it's becoming more progressive, and by the time it gets into the chronic and near fatal stage is the time that people actually get the services. That's what prevention is trying to stop this model from even starting. And when we talk about the brain then, and we do go into a little bit more detail with the brain and what's happening, it follows a pattern, and it affects a lot of different areas of the developing brain, much more so than in adults, because our brains are fully developed now. So we talk about binge and intoxication. That can be any substance. Though we might think of binge and intoxication, we automatically might think of alcohol right away. At least I do, and I know a lot of other people do. But in fact, it can be any substance that they're taking. They start by that first use, and then they start feeling negative effects and withdrawal symptoms the more they use. And then they're preoccupied and anticipating the next use because their brain wants that dopamine rush, and then they binge and use the substance again, and that cycle repeats. And once that cycle is intact, it is incredibly hard to break that cycle. And I think most of us will know that if you've ever known anyone that's tried to quit smoking, anyone that has ever had a family member or a personal relationship with addiction knows that that cycle is not easy. Once we're in that cycle, it is incredibly difficult to break that cycle. So that's why we're trying to deter the onset of them getting into that cycle before it's too late. All right, so here are the risk factors of addiction. And this is what we talk about with the students. This is really important to get them to understand we're not coming in here and telling you not to use drugs. We're coming in here and telling you here are some great risks if you use these substances and what can happen. The family history is vitally important. We know there's a genetic component to addiction. That people that have a family history of addiction are at a higher risk of developing a substance use disorder if they continue to use or even start to use. That's the same with a lot of other illnesses. There's a lot of family history of diseases that we might tell our students or our kids that we have a history of breast cancer, we have a history of diabetes, we have a history of high blood pressure, and things like that. Same thing with addiction. It's vitally important for students and young people to know if they have a family history so we can help them to make good choices and healthy choices. Age of first use, we talked about a little bit, and we're going to talk a lot about with students, especially those that are in the middle school, younger, where they may be starting to think about whether or not they want to use substances. They're starting to see it more happening in their peers. They're starting to pay attention to it. Their social media algorithms are promoting or encouraging or advertising towards certain substances. Their decision about whether or not they're going to use or start using is coming. Tolerance and emotional health go in there. Is a risk factor as someone becomes more tolerant to a substance, meaning they can consume more of it or they feel they need to consume more of it. They're starting to get in that cycle. So that's going from first use towards abuse, starting down that path. And the emotional health. We know that substance abuse and mental health illness go hand in hand. We know trauma is a very important motivator for people to turn to substances. From big T, little t trauma, all different adverse childhood experiences that they might have had that when not given the opportunity to express themselves in a healthy way or find services where they can work through their trauma, many people, that not just young people, adults as well, will turn to substances to help them numb the pain or self-medicate instead of getting the help that they need, talking to someone, seeing a doctor, whatever the case might be based on the trauma. So our emotional health is really important, understanding that the stronger our emotional health is, that's a great protective factor to turning to substances. And then perception gap, which is our social norms theory of addiction, which we are going to be hammering home with students. And we will tell you that the perception of use at this school is higher than the actual use at this school. All right. And I say that because the perception of use at every school we go to is almost always higher than the actual use by students. And we know this through survey after survey after survey that has been done all over the world about children and school-age people's, their perception of use among their peers, super high. And we have some activities that both Kimberly and I will be doing this week where we'll ask them, how many people in Europe or in Prague do you think are using alcohol on a regular basis? Or how many people you think in the last year have done it? And they'll say 65% or something like that. We'll be, okay, that's all right. But the actual answer is more like 20% on these surveys. And it's always like that. And I don't say those words a lot, always, never, all, everyone. It's almost always higher than the actual use, the perception. Why is that? The perception of use. So how many of their peers do they think are actually using substances? Why is that? Well, it goes into the same, they see one group of students doing it, and then they just think that everyone does it. It's the peer pressure. It gives them a social status. They want to be like those upper school students. And it happens a lot when you ask like grade 8 and 9, how many of the grade 12s are using. And they had heard about one party where maybe a lot of people drank. And then those grade 8 and 9s think that everyone then drinks. It's like, well, maybe they did once, or maybe they do every once in a while. But if you talk about those that might have drank in the last 30 days, which is a pretty good example of current use, when we survey students 30 days, it kind of says how many people are using regularly. It's much lower than it actually is. And just because you go to a party doesn't mean you use. Or certainly doesn't mean that you abuse the substance. And so they're just incapable, or they lack that reason to be able to think critically about, yeah, they went to a party, that doesn't mean they use. Grade 8 students, they went to a party, everyone drank, and then they're thinking, I want to be like that. They're cool. And then that influences their decision down the line of whether or not to use. And then their environment, and that has a lot to do, now the environment is getting more broad as the social media influences happen. So their environment includes their social and economical status, what's happening at home, what their social media algorithms are telling them, what the newest trends are, things like that. Those all influence and can be risk factors. All right, so let's talk about some warning signs, because you know your children better than anyone else. So we do see mood changes often, and it's like, well, I have a teenager, of course we have mood changes. Yes, that's very true, but we have to think about the consistency of that, or why are there mood changes? Are they going through some changes and they're having a really stressful time at school with some relationships they're having, and it's temporary, okay, but a continued amount of time, you're going to probably be able to tell the difference in changes of behavior from puberty and growing up to something that might be a little bit more serious about changes in their mental health or their behaviors in general. Changes in peer groups. Of course, we live in a transient population in an international world, so there are students coming and going. But it's more about changes in, are they hanging out with more people outside of the school, or a certain group of people that you know, or that might be using more frequently, or things like that. Lack of involvement, not going out for after-school activities anymore. Not hanging out at the same spiritual or religious centers that they used to, or community centers. Just all these little different things. Some of it is absolutely age appropriate and natural for teenagers to change peer groups, for teenagers to go through a lot of changes, for teenagers to just not make sense to you sometimes. But you're going to start understanding and knowing the difference, especially if you are finding substances or some paraphernalia and they're having changes in behavior. Or you might see a couple of these happening at the same time for a substantial amount of time. Those could be some warning signs to start having some conversations. So, what's our caregiver role in prevention? How can we help support them? And I heard something a while ago at a school that I can't unhear, and it's probably the best advice, or the best thing I've heard, and probably the best advice I can give parents. 61-minute conversations about health or drugs and alcohol are much better than one 60-minute conversation about it. If you're constantly talking about the newest trends, or what did you see in your social media, or did you know about this, or tell me what Mr. Kevin or Miss Kimberly said at school, and continue to have those conversations, right? They might roll their eyes at you 30 of those conversations, but Mom, I don't want to talk about this. Dad, I don't want to talk about this. But when they need to talk about it, because something is happening in their life, they know that they can come to you because you've already been having these conversations. You're open with them. I want to understand more. I want to help you. You told me that you don't want to vape. How can I support you in that decision? And they know that they have a partner that they can come talk to, not an authoritarian that's going to get them in trouble if they're honest about what's happening. All right, so try to educate yourself. That's why these additional resources I'll give you will be really good, because they'll provide you with not only ways to talk to them, but also specific drug information. So if you hear a word or you hear a drug that you don't know about, you can go to a different resource and you can look at what it is, what the street names for it, what are the signs and symptoms that drug provides. Be honest and share your concerns. At the end of the day, you want them to be safe. That's what you want. You don't want them to use drugs. And so it's okay to tell them that's what you want, but also understanding how difficult it is to be a teenager. We were all teenagers one time, and I think as parents and now older people, we forget how difficult it was to manage those emotions. When you're going through changes, we forget how difficult it is to put yourself out there and take a stand for what you believe in, because you might be seen as X, Y, or Z by other peers in your group. And we need to empathize with that and share that it's okay to do this. It's okay to feel that way. I'm so proud of you for making the healthy choice. How can I support you? That's a phrase I'll keep saying, is how can I support. Set clear boundaries and expectations and avoid mixed messages. Offer alternatives and support. How can you encourage them to participate in more activities after school that provide dopamine rush? Can you host different parties? or things like that that don't involve substances? Can you take them somewhere in Prague to go do something fun when they might want to, or instead of going out with friends or bringing the friends along, or whatever the case might be. Just providing them with alternatives and providing them a way to stop being bored, because boredom and loneliness can lead to substance use. Stay connected and keep that open dialogue. That's the 61-minute conversations. Using open-ended questions. Tell me what you know. What do you know about this substance? Where did you hear that from? Let's have a conversation about that. Keep some open-ended questions. And try to intervene early. Okay? And that some of that might include some discipline, but it also is very important to provide them with I understand that was really difficult. I mean, I wish you wouldn't have made that choice, but you did. Let's talk about what happened. I know it's really hard sometimes to handle your feelings and emotions because you're going through a very difficult time at school with your friends. All right, so what led you to do this? How can I help you so you don't do that next time? Things like that.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
So what is mixed message in that context? I don't understand. Is it like, okay, it's okay to drink alcohol, but I don't want you to do it? Or what would you consider being a mixed message?
So mixed messages would be things like, okay, at one point you're going to get them in trouble, I'm sorry, you're not going to get them in trouble. At one point you might discipline them because they went to a party and they drank alcohol, but then during Christmas, you're allowing them to drink at home with you or something, which if that's what you want, then but set a boundary or an expectation that you can do this when you're with us. Because it's very common in Europe, especially, to have younger people start drinking at an earlier age. Whereas it's socially acceptable to have a glass of wine or beer or whatever with family members, but it's not as acceptable for them or socially acceptable to go out and get drunk. Okay? So just because you can drink at home doesn't mean that you can go get drunk with your friends, type of thing. Okay, so this is the social norms theory that we talk about, that perception gap, which we touched on a little bit. So people tend to do what they believe everyone else is doing. That's the social norms theory. It has nothing to do with addiction. This theory has been around for a really long time. And if you think of all the social norms that you have in your family, in your culture, in Prague, in Czech Republic, whatever the case might be, it happens all the time. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and we travel quite a bit. There is no law at any country ever that says you have to smile and make noises when she's throwing a tantrum. There's no law that says you have to do that, but everybody does that when she's going through some hard time when you walk through the airport or whatever. They're, making noises, faces, because, it takes a village type of thing. But that's just a norm that we have. There's no law that says you have to open the door for the elderly people going into the grocery store, but we do that because we saw someone before us do that. And when we have teenagers that are in 8th grade or 9th grade that heard about a party, didn't go to it, heard about some people that drank, maybe heard about some people that were vaping, heard about some people that were using marijuana, they tend to believe that everyone's doing it then. And so then what everyone else is doing becomes the norm at the school. Mom, everybody in grade 12 vapes. Are you sure about everybody? Okay, because we know, those are some of those challenging questions. Everybody? Are you sure? Have you seen everybody vape? Or are you thinking this because of one event that happened? Or whatever the case might be. But that becomes the norm. So it's especially important with those that are just starting to use like grade 8s and 9s. Everybody in ISP vapes. Therefore, it becomes the norm at ISP to vape. However, those perceptions are not always accurate. Rarely are. But our future behaviors are driven by what's called false normative beliefs. If everybody in the upper school vapes and I want to fit in when I'm in the upper school, I need to vape too. And if you talk about somebody that smokes cigarettes or vapes now that's an adult, and you had to go back and you gave them a pill and said, if I'm going to give you this pill, then you're going to have to be honest with me. Okay, this is an honest pill. Say, why did you start smoking? There'd be probably one of two answers. Everybody else was doing it, it made me look cool. That's why they did it. That's why people start smoking. And now that's why people start vaping. It's because everyone else is doing it and they thought it was cool. All right? So that's the perception gap, the social norms theory. Incredibly important when we talk about addiction. And we're going to work with this through providing some activities and things like that so we can point out those false normative beliefs that students in this school are going to have. And I know that already, and I haven't even talked to them yet. But it happens at every school. All right, I do a trivia game. Speaking of vaping and nicotine, I do a trivia game with some of the students where I get to talk, I ask them questions and we'll do a little bit. So I'm only gonna give you a couple questions and this is gonna be our intro to the vaping and nicotine section, which is so vitally important at every school. So I'll walk into a school and I'll meet with the students. Sometimes I do it in the assembly if it's like the first thing. Okay, I'll walk in and I'll say, hey, you guys don't know who I am, or I haven't seen you before, or I'll say, I know this school. Before I ever talk to Brenda or Colleen or anyone else at the school, I know there is a problem at this school with vaping. How do I know that? And they'll be like, because you saw it in the news, because they told you. I said, I just told you I didn't talk to them yet. And they just sit there and I say, because every school I go to has a problem with vaping right now. Every single one. And it's nothing new. Just because it's vaping, it used to be cigarettes. It used to be in different nicotine products, but now it's vaping. And we know this, you know about it if you have, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know that vaping is a problem, even if you don't have teenage students in here. And so we have to talk about it when we go to a school. We just have to. And so this is like the intro to the nicotine section. So it takes an average nicotine user 3 to 5 attempts to quit using nicotine products. Raise your hand if you agree with that statement. Raise your hand if you disagree. If you disagree, do you think it is more or less? More. Yeah. So the research suggests it takes 5 to 7 attempts. That is from the World Health Organization. That's from the CDC. The World Health Organization and the American Physicians Association and American Lung Association are more like 8 to 11 attempts. And the reason is we have a false normative belief that it's okay if I take nicotine, I can quit anytime. That's been a phrase that has been uttered by high school students since the dawn of nicotine. I can quit anytime. And the research suggests that's not true. And now that vapes have such high milligram dosage of nicotine in them, are much stronger, and are able to be used more discreetly than cigarettes are, this is becoming more and more true by the minute. Because it's far more likely now to go into a school and talk to students who are actually addicted to nicotine. Unlike going into a school and finding anyone that might be addicted to alcohol. That's pretty rare because it takes time for that to happen. And they just can't do it in the bathrooms at school. They cannot have cocktails in the bathroom at school. They cannot drink beer in their bedroom, or they have a higher likelihood of getting caught. Whereas with vape products now and nicotine pouches, they can use nicotine in far more places, much more discreetly than we've ever seen with nicotine before. All right? And so that is part of the reason why we see, if not the main reason why we see students that are already addicted to nicotine, and they are already trying to quit and having trouble. When I came to Prague in 2022, and the first time that I started going to schools, the number one thing that students came into my office and asked me about was a friend or loved one. Okay? And then, of course, sometimes they said friend or loved one, and I was like, yeah, okay. I know you're talking about you, but that's okay. I'll meet you where you are. Now, students are coming in to school now that they've known me for a couple years, or at the end of the week when they trust me and they understand I'm not here to get them in trouble, they're asking me, I can't stop vaping. How do I quit? Okay? So that is a real thing that's happening, and part of the reason why you'll have a resource that can help them build a quit plan. If you have that relationship with your kid and they come to you and they want to quit vaping and they don't know how, you'll be able to start leading them in the right direction. All right. In a 1991 study done in the USA, 6-year-old children were able to recognize Joe Camel at the same rate as Mickey Mouse. Okay? Raise your hand if you agree with that statement. Okay, so if you're all 6-year-olds, I would hold up this picture of Joe Camel and you would all go, that's Joe Camel, which is terrifying, right? It's true, okay? Because there was a time when Joe Camel was on every advertising platform that existed in 1991. Students now have no idea who Joe Camel is because, as you can probably imagine, this was a bad idea to begin with. But you can't advertise that way now. But you can take Joe Camel out here and this ad still exists. A catchy tagline with a cool car, beautiful people, and bright colors. The advertising techniques that got people hooked to nicotine cigarettes in 1991 or at any time still exist to this day. They're just disguised in other ways. And in 1991, I was 6 years old. And I remember Joe Camel. And whether or not that influenced my decision to smoke cigarettes, which I did smoke cigarettes, or not, I don't know. But at 6 years old, we already associated Joe Camel with being cool and being okay and being safe. And so in our subconscious, that false normative belief about nicotine was already forming. And the same kind of stuff can be happening for people that, especially for 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds that have older siblings that might see their social media and are seeing pictures of beautiful people doing really cool things while holding a vape. So that's why this question is up here, because that technique is continuing to this day. And lastly, young people who vape are less likely to smoke cigarettes in their future. Raise your hand if you agree with that statement. All right, good. The research is suggesting they're about 3.5 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes, and most of those people will be doing both. They will smoke cigarettes and they will vape. So they might vape at the office, these adults, they might vape at the office or in their dorm room or in their car, but then when they're out socially, they might smoke cigarettes as well. Okay? So again, discreet, by the way, this is a slide clicker, not a vape. But this is discreet, and a cigarette is not. And so they'll use that together. All right, so if we talk about vapes here, we're in this third and fourth generation, okay? The pod mods are the refillable ones, and the single-use disposable plastic vape with a battery in it, this one. The governments around the world are starting to try to get rid of these products, the single-use ones, for a lot of different reasons, but primarily because with the flavorings and whatnot, they're advertised to young people. They're also terrible for the environment with the way that they're built. But what's happening with a lot of these new vapes is the nicotine salt. So we had our boss and founder of the organization was in Switzerland not too long ago at a school, and there's a huge Philip Morris tobacco plant in Switzerland, and one of the parents that was in a meeting like this, worked for Philip Morris, and he said, pretty soon we're not going to need the nicotine plant. They're developing nicotine salts, which is just a new synthetic nicotine that is more cost effective, so they don't have to worry about the farming and the middleman to get the plant into the form they need. They can just create it in a lab, and they have particularly high levels of nicotine. They cause less irritation in the throat, so there's less short-term irritation that comes with it, and higher dosages of nicotine. So we can have younger people taking nicotine and ingesting nicotine at a faster rate and a higher rate, which leads them to becoming addicted or dependent on the substance faster. So you'll see if you're ever shopping for vapes or you're in a store, even if you don't vape or don't smoke, go look at some of those. See what the ingredients are. It's not hard to find a vape being sold here or anywhere else. Go look at that and see if it's made with nicotine salts. Okay? You'll be surprised how many actually are right now. All right, so we talk about the advertising, because as I said, it continues to exist. These are fantastic we can look at these and laugh and say, man, what were we thinking back then? Well, we weren't. Actually, our parents, what were our parents thinking here when you see some of these ads? And obviously they don't exist. You don't have any physicians going on there and telling you to use a certain vape product. But what you do have is then the evolution of the ad. I mean, this is only from 2000. I mean, that's 25 years ago now. But it continues with like this cool look. It is cool. It's a pleasure to burn. You use our product. You look cool. Look what can happen. And then even this one from 2018, Juul, when Juul was exploding, the OG, the original vape that was targeting to minors and young people, right? Wind down the day. Juul's telling you there's no other way that you can calm yourself down after a tough day than using our product. And things like that continue, those type of ads continue over time. And it's nothing new. I mean, shoe companies, clothing companies, energy drinks, food, junk food, they all follow kind of the same pattern. Some of those are, junk food, yeah, we wish our kids wouldn't eat as much junk food, or we wish they wouldn't want to buy the most expensive pair of shoes when they're not going to wear them for more than 6 months before they blow out of them, or whatever the case might be. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of health risks, or there's not a lot of risks for a teenager wanting an expensive pair of shoes. These cause problems though. And Jewel has been doing this, and they have, to this day, I should say as of February 2024, so about a year ago, they have been sued now for over $2 billion US dollars for a multitude of different reasons, but mostly contaminated vapes, advertising to young people, and premature death caused by their product. And it's because they were using flavorings, bright colors and beautiful people to get their product out there. Jewel, like I said, has been sued. They are back. They can only sell their product in 2 flavors now, tobacco and menthol, which are traditional cigarette flavors. But the companies that came after that took their same model, went to their legal department and their legal team, found out how they can advertise in a way where they weren't going to get in the same kind of trouble as Jewel did. Jewel they didn't hide it. They said it was one of their ad techniques and their ad campaigns was a safer alternative to nicotine cigarettes. And for someone who has been vaping or smoking cigarettes for 40 or 50 years, there might be some truth in that. Or wants to quit, it might help them quit because they can take 1 or 2 puffs rather than a whole cigarette, and they might be able to dwindle down. The problem is that when Jewel said it's a safer alternative to nicotine cigarettes, they were all also advertising and to teenagers and young people. And so really in that case, like a safer alternative to nicotine cigarettes for a 16-year-old is not smoking, not vaping. That's not the safer alternative. All right, so we do see the tobacco industry has a kids menu. Now, they don't necessarily have a menu that says the kids menu on it, but they are very strategic in how they do this. First of all, these actually look like menus. For me, they do, because in Oman, we're dry country, you go in and they have all kinds of different fruit juices and things like that. It's actually really great for someone who is in long-term recovery and doesn't drink. I have a lot of options of things to drink. But these are all different flavorings, and some of these might be really hard for you to see from back there, but you have strawberry, raspberry, cherry ice. Which one is it? Figure it out. But then it's like there's a little rating scale here. It's sweetness, 3 out of 5. Coolness, 4 out of 5. Sourness, 3 out of 5. And each one of these has these. Now, and then you come over here. I took these from online. These are online vape stores. Mercedes is the name of that, right? White Nectar, Mr. Smookies, okay? Strawberry, marshmallow, macaroons. That's what Mr. Smookies is. Okay, so these are out here, and adults use these absolutely. Absolutely adults use these. But really what they're targeting is younger people with these flavorings, these cool names, all right? And what you don't hear, you see a government warning that's on the bottom. I took the full screenshot. But none of these here will tell you the milligram dosage of nicotine on them. You have to click on that to get a little bit more information. So by the time someone sees Mr. Smookies, a teenager, they want that. It doesn't matter. They're going to click that and try to buy it. It doesn't matter that it might be 50 milligrams of nicotine in it compared to a pack of cigarettes that has about 22. Doesn't matter. They're already hooked. All right, so as we said, here are some of these old advertisements. This is a good 1990s ad campaign of cool cigarettes. And it still exists. Now you're getting vaporized. This is Jewel, right? They started this. Bright lights, beautiful people, doing fun things. All right, so cigs and an e-cig. As I said, a normal pack of cigarettes is about 22 milligrams of cigarettes. And they're like that because they're very regulated. You can't really find a pack of cigarettes somewhere that's going to advertise that they are 50 milligrams per pack, because they can't. The laws of the EU, the laws of most countries, they are all almost the same, give or take. But we've seen a gradual increase in the milligram dosage of vapes. This is Elf Bar, which was, and it kind of goes back and forth, maybe still is the most popular vape brand in the US right now, and in Europe. It's in Europe as well. And they contain a lot of nicotine in that. So this is about 650 milligrams of nicotine, and it's equivalent to roughly 600 cigarettes. So it is intended to last longer, but when we talk about tolerance and discreteness of it, even though it's equivalent to 600 cigarettes, that doesn't mean that it's going to take someone the same amount of time to finish the product as it would for 600 cigarettes. Let's say it takes a month for someone to finish 600 cigarettes. I'm just throwing a number out there. It's probably not going to take them a month to finish that vape equivalent because they can do it more often, more frequent, and more discreetly. Not to mention, they have a higher dosage of nicotine, so their body is going to tell them they need it because they're becoming dependent on it. Those withdrawal symptoms are going to happen sooner, quicker, because of the high milligram dosage. This is the student's favorite slide, right? So we don't know all of the different chemicals and what's going to happen. We don't know the full long-term effects of vaping yet. We just don't have the resource and the time that is needed to do the thorough research of vapes. We know what's going to happen. We know what can happen, I should say, to someone who smoked cigarettes for 50 years. We have decades and decades of research on that topic. We know the higher risk of lung cancer. We know the secondhand smoke of someone who is living with someone who is smoking cigarettes frequently, what might happen to them. We don't know that with vapes yet. What we do know is there are a bunch of chemicals that are found in vape flavorings, which about 95% of teenagers and young adults are using flavored vapes. And we also know that from this list, that's from the Stanford University Tobacco Toolkit, we know that about half of these are known carcinogens, known to cause cancer. Carcinogens means a cancer-causing agent. We know that some of these are also found in cigarettes too. So the risk is there. To think that that vaping is a safer alternative to anything is just not true right now. And in fact, with the research that's coming out, for teenagers and young people, there's a pretty good chance that vaping is going to be more dangerous than nicotine products. Unless we get ourselves together and put some regulations and understand this and how we're going to advertise like we did with cigarettes. There is no Joe Cool anymore, or Joe Camel. We have to start doing the same type of thing with vaping. How that's done, I don't know. That's out of my game. I'm just saying do something, and I'm going to try to let the smarter people figure that out. But we know that there's a lot of flavorings in there, and there's more and more products that come out every single day. And some of them can go through testing or have very little testing. So we're going to get products that are going to have a lot of different chemicals that are found in it. And we don't necessarily know the long-term effects of humans and ingesting all of these chemicals because we don't do that on a very regular basis. And the market is so huge that there are a lot of different risks that we don't fully understand yet. Okay. Yeah. So there are some regulations that are coming out when it comes to single-use vapes. It's statewide. I think New York, did they ban the single-use? I thought New York City did.
I'm not sure.
California. There are some, they're trying, but generally speaking, there are very few regulations on that. And that's an issue. Like we could maybe start with how about regulating how much nicotine is in one? That would be a good place to start. Yeah.
Most of them are, especially by the kids, are bought online.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's difficult to regulate something that's most likely and almost always bought online is the only place that they can kind of fake their age as well. So like state-to-state regulations may not have an impact on that.
Yep.
I meant manufacturing regulations of what you can put in it, like a drug that you buy has usually
marijuana, and can you include it in this? Can you buy these e-cigarettes and put marijuana in it, or is this completely different?
With marijuana?
Yes.
Yes. In the States, you can. They have THC vapes. They have vapes now that have things for your mood. They have caffeine vapes. They have, basically they're putting essential oils into vapes now. And sure, are those going to be a little bit safer than having nicotine in it, so you're not going to get addicted to that? And propylene glycol, which is the first one, and even things like formaldehyde, yes. But we also don't know all of the long-term effects that are going to happen from those chemicals that are found in these basically essential oil vapes. It's part of that question is like, if a teenager, or anyone, for me personally, if anyone is taking a vape to help them feel calm, it's like, do you think that there's a way that you can feel calm without ingesting things into your lungs? I think there is. Because we've known about coping skills from, who knows, activity, athletics, working out, reading a book. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get calm that don't involve ingesting chemicals into your lungs. But people buy it because we want that fix now. We want to feel calm now. We want energy now. We want to have whatever we're feeling go away now. So it's no surprise. But with marijuana, I don't know how prevalent it is in Europe because it wasn't. I lived in Bulgaria for 5 years until this year and traveled around Europe, and I never really saw or heard students, parents, anyone talking about marijuana vapes. In the US, they're everywhere. Everywhere. It's very, very common. So it's probably only a matter of time before it becomes more common over here. All right, nicotine pouches or snus, which is a big thing. I've seen it. I think maybe some of you know about nicotine pouches or snus. It is another discreet way to use nicotine without getting caught. Originally, they were from the Nordic countries, and it was a way to help people quit smoking. Basically, kind of like nicotine gum, in a way to help people quit smoking. Tobacco companies saw that and said, hey, we can make a lot of money off of promoting it and having it be cherry flavored, or cool ice, or there's the reason I'm going through some flavors because it's illegal to buy, it's illegal to sell nicotine pouches and vapes in Oman, except for at the airport. So they have a duty free, and they have like a shrine of nicotine pouches and vapes. So I always go through there and look at all the different flavors and milligram dosages of them. And so I was trying to go through some of the flavors that I remember from there. But nicotine pouches, Zyn is the most popular brand in the world. It controls about half of the market share worldwide. The global market share, very popular in the US. Zinning has become like a word. I think it was included in the Oxford Dictionary last year. And it is a pouch that goes into your upper lip. It is meant to stay in your lip for about 15 to 20 minutes, and it releases nicotine in there. And if you go on some of the websites like Zyn, it will actually say something along these lines. I'm paraphrasing, but it says that if you feel the burn, you know it's working. Because the nicotine needs to get into your bloodstream. The only way to get into your bloodstream, just like chewing tobacco, is for it to puncture the outer skin membrane a little bit so you can get the nicotine in. Hence the burn that you have. Very, very discreet and high nicotine dosage. So Zyn here for this brand, they have 3, 6, and 9 milligram dosage per pouch. This has 15 pouches in it. And there's 6 milligrams. That's 90 milligrams of nicotine. That is equivalent to about 4 packs of cigarettes. And it is not inconceivable to think that a teenager can't finish one of these tins in a day or two. No joke, I've had it happen in a school, not this one, but in a school, fell right out of a student's mouth when I was talking. Right? We know what's happening. I've seen it in schools, on the floor, all around, Zyn pouches or nicotine pouches being done in school. And the reason, again, it's a discreet way, what we're finding is that people also then will turn to cigarettes or vapes when they don't need to be as discreet with their nicotine use. So use a Zyn during the workday, during the school day. When I am not at work or school, then I will use another or a different nicotine product because I need or feel that I need the nicotine. All right, so Velo is really popular in Europe. They also have different strength from 2 to 4 to 6 and different. There's a brand called Siberia that I believe are 50 milligrams per pouch. They have different flavors. I know you might not be able to see this, but wintergreen, black cherry, citrus burst, dragon fruit. They follow that same type of model as vapes do. So this is Icebreaker's mints. This is regular mint that you might know of. They follow that, they use some of those advertising techniques in their products. It looks similar. They really do look like a tin of gum or a tin of mints. They have different varieties like these slims or minis, so they're even more discreet. Still have a lot of nicotine in them. So they've gone with, it's the same marketing strategy that the candy and junk food companies use. They just adapted that to nicotine and drugs in general. And they use a lot of these different advertising techniques. Season snoozin' for Christmas time. You can see these. This is like a music festival or something where they'll have big Zyn tents. They sell them for really cheap. You can go in. I go to a music festival in Montana every year, and in the middle of July, it's really, really hot. And they have one of those, and it's very convenient because inside when you go, it's also air conditioned. A very popular tent at that music festival. Also makes me feel old because most of the people in there are like 20. But they offer that same advertising type of technique. This is not for students to see, okay? Because I'm not in the business of introducing new products, but I want to just throw something out at you that you might see happening, because this is a newish product. These are toothpicks that contain nicotine. There are also toothpicks that contain THC, which is marijuana. So trying to be a little proactive. If we all of a sudden have a lot of people in school with toothpicks in their mouth, right, we can maybe get ahead of that a little bit. Also, since we travel, these are mostly found in the US. As far as I know, they're not in Europe, but easy. I know we have a lot of students from the US or go to the US or travel and whatnot. Very easy to bring along in pack without any problems. So this product exists. There are some products that have yet to exist that will be as easy or discreet as this one. The market and the way that nicotine and THC, which is the active ingredient marijuana, but the way that the nicotine and tobacco companies are evolving, we're going to see a lot more products like this. They're going to come up. Newer ways, more efficient ways to get people the nicotine or to get people the THC. Because at the end of the day, these companies, Picotine, they want to make money. THC companies want to make money. THC's, I'm just going to go on a little digression here, but marijuana is legal in 33 states and the District of Columbia in the US. It's legal in Canada federally. It's legal in different parts of the world as well. In the US, THC marijuana companies are not advertising to young people. They're not. And it's strange. You would think it became legal, let's start getting the young people to use our product. And in fact, that's not who they're trying to sell their product to. Some of it is because it's relatively new, so they're worried about if they do start doing that, they're going to be shut down because it still is federally illegal to use marijuana in the US. So they could get in a lot of trouble and they could close down their shops. But they know, or for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because they care more or whatever, but they're advertising to people that are already using marijuana. Mostly young adults and even people our age that have been using marijuana for a long time. So that's the difference between marijuana and nicotine when it comes to it. They're still using these toothpicks, okay, but it's going to be a lot harder for a younger person to get them than the nicotine toothpicks. So as you can find THC in everything in the US. Everything. Name a food, it contains THC in it. But you won't find the same advertising techniques to young people like you do with nicotine. Nicotine, again, since the dawn of time, doesn't care. They're looking to try to get lifelong smokers as early as they possibly can. So they'll do anything to do that within the law and even outside of the law. So this is another one that came out. It's an actual working video game on the module for a vape. Okay, found this online. There's also, in case anyone wonders, yes, there is a Reddit page that will help with your tech support if the game stops working. But this most likely was just a quick trend. Okay, you're not going to see these around very often because one, for teenagers, it's pretty hard to be discreet with that. Okay, but the point is that these are the type of products that are created. And yeah, do adults want to do it and it's like play this because it's a gimmick? Or young adults maybe? Sure. But generally speaking, again, these are advertised to people aged 25 and younger. We're going to talk about alcohol. Okay, we definitely are with the upper school students and the middle schoolers to touch on a little bit, introduce it. But the reason I want to show this here is because there is a growing concern around Europe and in the US with galaxy gas or nitrous oxide, or whippets, as maybe you might have heard before from your younger years. It is the ingestion of laughing gas. It's not a new phenomenon, it's been around for a really long time, but with the introduction of galaxy gas, which basically is used for food service, for flavored whipped creams and things for dessert. You can put them in drinks. They become more popular for restaurants to use in an effective way. And it's kind of cool. Like if you get a dessert that has different colored whipped cream, or they introduce it into some food and it causes a little effect. Like that's a fun dining experience. But that means that it's more readily available for young people. And they will use nitrous oxide to get a high from it. People have been doing that literally since it's been created by the chemist, the physician, the pharmacist that created it in England in the late 70s, at 1700s, not 70s. He started immediately having laughing gas parties with the elites in the UK, in London. Ironically enough, he died very young at age 45 from a stroke, most likely because nitrous oxide and laughing gas raises the risks of blood clots, which will cause stroke, so he died from his own invention. But the reason I put this up there, this is some what's called the myelin sheath, or the creation of myelin or myelination, and it's what every teenager is going through right now. It is strengthening their nerves, their nerve cells that they'll need for the rest of their life. And the single most important vitamin the body creates to help make myelin, or help the process of myelination, is B12. So the B12 is creating this hot dog looking protection along the nerves. And that just allows whatever signal it is in the brain to go from one neuron to another quickly, effectively, in the way it's supposed to. When there is a depletion in B12, you will then get damaged nerve cells that will not send the signal as quickly, efficiently, and normally as it should. And that can lead to long-term problems with memory, coordination, balance, visual impairments, unable to recognize faces because it affects the occipital part of the brain. So in alcohol and binge drinking, it's also a depletion in B12. In nitrous oxide, the single biggest risk for it is the depletion of B12. It can cause damaged neurons or brain cells to be damaged permanently. Right? So I heard when I was in high school, I heard that nitrous oxide kills your brain cells. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Like, that's not actually what happens, and I never did it as a young person, but I was like, I bet that actually doesn't happen. Turns out, it doesn't necessarily kill them, it just damages them permanently, so they might as well be dead, because they're not functioning the way they should. And that's very dangerous when it comes to nitrous oxide. Okay? And we're going to talk a lot about this with students because it is a growing concern in schools and in communities all over the world right now, because it's easily accessible. It's easy to do. It doesn't last very long, so you're far less likely to get caught doing that. The high from using nitrous oxide is like 3 to 5 minutes. And then it can last a little bit longer, the full effects, but the peak high doesn't last very long. And so it's quite dangerous. Okay, so these are my additional resources. Again, you'll get these sent out to take a look through them. I highly recommend the Drug Wheel. It's an interactive drug-specific information Our friends in Australia are very good in the world of prevention. So if you're ever looking up drug prevention and it's a website from Australia, look at it. They're very good at it, teaching prevention. Okay, we've got a couple minutes. Any questions, concerns, queries anyone might have? Yes?
Yes, I do have a question. So it's all very interesting for teenagers to try, right? So I was wondering, when we have these discussions with our children, it even starts at a younger age, it's just so fascinating to abuse substances. How can I make it less attractive? And it doesn't work to say go and play football. It's just this fascination by doing something that is harmful for yourself, for others, or that is forbidden. And that's what it is about, right?
Yeah.
So we all know this.
Yeah.
And this is my, what are good ways of, because we are boring, we are parents.
Yeah.
I can't create something that is so attractive, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice from your, because you're talking to many students?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. It's really hard. One, and not only, I mean, you said we're boring, we're parents, and that's what a lot of teenagers think, but also, a lot of parents use the substances in an appropriate way. Okay, but there is no safe way for a teenager to use any drugs. None, really, because of the developing brain. I know culturally speaking, especially alcohol, is used more frequently in Europe than other places. And there is an argument that, we're helping them learn how to use the substance. And they're specifically not abusing the substances with their family, which is the most important part, is not to abuse the substance. What happens is we want to try to denormalize, and I don't know if that's a word, I might have just made that up, but to stop having it be a normal way. So, and what part of it is when you are talking to your kid and they start saying, well, Mom, everyone's doing it. Stop that right there, because that's fully not true. And not say that's not true, but say, are you sure about that? Do you have some evidence that supports that everybody is doing it? Because words matter when we're talking to ourselves. And this is through therapy and counseling forever, is words, all or nothing thinking, always, everyone, nobody, never. Those types of words are really important and really can shape a person's thinking and their decision making. If everyone is doing it, someone is more likely to decide to do it because they think that. Right? I wish I had the silver bullet answer that I could give you, because I would be rich if I could, but I don't. It comes down to you and your relationship with your kids. If you are open and honest with them about your concerns, about what you want, about having them come and talk to you about that, and then it just kind of diminishes that going against authority. And maybe they're more likely to come talk to you about what happened. And especially if something does happen at a party and they did something that maybe they wouldn't have done. They were pressured into doing it. They didn't think it was as big a deal as it was, using the substance, getting drunk, using nitrous oxide. And then they did it, and they don't know what happened. They're worried about what happened to their body. If they have I can go talk to my mom, because the first thing my mom's going to do is talk to me about it, and then maybe my mom's going to discipline me, instead of my mom's going to discipline me. I can't go talk to her and tell her I did this, because then I'm not going to be able to have my phone for a month. Right? And that's part of it. Parents, it's all over. And maybe some of you do this. You might have code words where text me this word and I'll come pick you up, no questions asked. So get you out of that situation, which is great. I highly encourage it. But, we're going to get them home safe, because that's what we all want. So they text pineapple, and you're going to go pick them up from that party, and then they're going to get in your car and they're drunk, and you're going to be really upset and disappointed. But you know what? You got them home safe. Tomorrow morning, we're going to have a conversation about what happened, and we're hopefully going to go through that decision process. Or, Mom, pineapple again, right? So that means that you're going to call me and tell me I have to come home right now so that I can blame my mom for why I'm going to leave this party and not use a substance. I'd take that as a new parent. I hope my daughter messages me all the time and says, I don't know how to say no right now. I'm having trouble. Can you call and yell at me or tell me I have to come home? Sure, that'd be great. I'm going to think of new creative ways to yell at you too while we're doing it. And then that helps them and takes that decision out. Like, it's not my choice that I said no, it's because my mom said it. Then we can have a conversation about how to help them say no later, or what was going through your head when they were trying to pressure you into doing that. Why did you want to do that in the first place? Those types of things. It's really difficult though, because you're not there. And so it's much more important to have all these conversations at home about your expectations of them, about what might happen to their brain, and understand that it's okay to make mistakes, but let's talk about it when it happens. You can come to me anytime you need me, type of thing. Okay, if you want to see us do it again, we'll be here on Wednesday. It's so nice we're doing it twice. But otherwise, feel free to submit any questions to the counseling team principals, and we can get to you by the end of the week. We're here to help and do whatever we can. Okay? So thank you.